Welcome to this edition of our weekly webinar series sponsored by the Committee on the Present Danger China. Its focus is on the unrestricted warfare the Chinese Communist Party has waged against this country for decades, the damage it does, and the extent to which we are not sufficiently cognizant that it's even happening, let alone the toll that it is taking. A very important development, which is occurring as we speak, is the publication of a new book by one of our most esteemed members of the Committee on the Present Danger China. His name is Dr. Bradley Thayer. And Dr. Thayer has just literally today published an important book called America's 100-Year Wars with the Communist Chinese, among others, the communists more generally, many of them under the influence, certainly being enabled by the Chinese. But before that, with, of course, the Soviet Union, and at the very beginning of its life, the spawning of the Comintern and the Bolsheviks spreading this evil, toxic ideology worldwide. We are celebrating this publication and the focus that it is giving to the threat we face in our time, in what Dr. Thayer calls a revolutionary moment, in which the communists, foreign and domestic, and by the way, their allies in the Sharia supremacist camp, are prepared to seize power in our country if, God forbid, they have their way. We're going to hear from Dr. Thayer himself about the book, about its main purpose and points, as well as the call to action that is a very, very important component of it, especially in this revolutionary moment, as we will talk about in the course of the program, in the run-up, most especially, to the midterm elections of 2026. Dr. Thayer was kind enough to sit for an interview with me in our Securing America program on Real America's Voice, with the understanding that we would expropriate highlights of his comments there for the present purpose. Delighted to say, in addition to being a key member of our committee, Brad Thayer is a senior fellow of a wonderful organization, the American Freedom Alliance. As it happens, we will be hearing in the course of the program from its president, Dr. Karen Sigeman, another very important member of our committee, as well as supporter and admirer and podcast host with Brad Thayer, who will give us her insights into both the book and its author and the important message we'll take away from it, but that will come in a few minutes. Let's start with Brad Thayer and the video from our recording earlier today on Securing America. So Brad, give us just the sort of short course on how it is that we could possibly have been at war with these guys for easily 100 years and still be so clueless about the threat that they represent and the fact that it's now within our own gates.
Well, Frank, it's a great question. The reason, in essence, is because we've forgotten how we defeated communism in the past and how excellent the communists are at waging political warfare. So the argument of the book was generated by a sense I believe you have, I do, and many in the audience will as well, that the United States has lost its way. We are in a revolutionary time. We don't identify it as a revolutionary time, but we are, where the ideas of Lenin and the Bolsheviks are coming to fruition in the United States in conjunction with their allies in the Chinese Communist Party, who are working with traitors in the United States and elsewhere to undermine American identity and to kill the United States as a constitutional republic and replace it with a communist totalitarian government. That's the intent. So this is a revolutionary time. And what the book does is really make three major arguments. First, it explains the genesis of the Bolshevik intent, how the Bolsheviks operate since 1917, very successfully, of course, at undermining governments in Europe, in the United States, of course, forming the Communist Party of the United States, as well as the Chinese Communist Party, and leading it and directing it. So it's very important to understand the nature of the threat and how they operate. Lenin identified three paths to the communist revolution. First, the coup d'etat, which he recognized was not going to work. It worked in Russia in 1917, but was not going to work elsewhere. Secondly, communism would be spread by the Red Army. That was attempted in 1920 most famously, but praise God, stopped outside of Warsaw by the Poles and a Franco-Polish force. Thirdly, Lenin identified the United Front. And the United Front was a way of doing whatever works to undermine a society from within, to unhinge it. That is, to bore from within, to undermine the present government while working to replace it with a communist government. And this is what we're seeing in the United States as well as more broadly in the West, where the communists successfully penetrated. They undermined the ideas industry, most importantly. The ideas industry, K through 12 education, our colleges, our universities, our media, our museums, for example. Look at the Smithsonian, Frank. If you have a chance to be, you'll be appalled at what the Smithsonian is saying about American history. NGOs, think tanks, where Americans get their ideas and where those ideas were sustained. Traditionally, those were strong supporters of American national identity, but the communists, again, bore from within and undermined them. The Democratic Party, Frank, really the jewel of the crown of what the communists were able to seize, as Earl Browder identified in the 40s, the way the communists were going to succeed was not through the Communist Party of the United States, but by seizing control of the Democratic Party. So we are in the final stage of their revolution, where they're using mass immigration to import new populations into the United States as a way of taking that final step, Frank. You know, of course, in your time in the Pentagon, the importance of mass. Numbers matter. And when you have not only the 20 million who've been imported under Biden, over 20 million, goodness knows how many actually, when they're importing, heaven forbid if they come back into power, 60 million, 80 million, the United States as a constitutional republic will be over. The second big argument is, what do we do about it? Well, what we do about it is restore American identity. American identity is rooted in, of course, our spirit, the spirit of 1776. We are Americans. We have a unique identity. We are a unique people founded by geniuses who created the best government that's existed. Secondly, we understand and need to appreciate and have a rebirth of political liberalism. The idea that we are individuals, we are not groups the way the communists see us, but we are individuals. And individuals have rights given by God. And those rights cannot be taken away by governments or any other actor. And the third component, of course, is from that. We emphasize liberty and freedom, the importance of the rule of law and free market. When we understand who we are, we have the best antidote to communism. The stronger our identity is, the weaker communism is. And the final element of that is, of course, Western civilization. Liberalism comes from Western thought, and Western civilization, of course, is so important. So, armed with our understanding of who we are, we need to take action. Every election from now on needs to be too big to rig. Frank, you know the shenanigans, the cheating the Democrats undergo in every election. In November 26, it has to be too big to rig, as well as in 2028 as well. The final element is really what we need to do, besides individuals taking action at a local level, getting involved as folks can in politics, participating as folks can. We need to, again, understand our identity, and work assiduously and actively to counter communist propaganda. They're not at the point where they're able to fulfill the revolution, but we are on the cusp of that, Frank, and it's a very dangerous time, again, a revolutionary time in American history. It's a genius idea to have a midterm convention and to emphasize freedom, to emphasize the antidote to communism. At that. President Trump, of course, has been arguing for months now about the dangers of communism and why it will never succeed in the United States. You can be an American patriot or you can be a communist. You cannot be both, as he has stressed time and again, and not a moment too soon, again, because as we reference the advances that the communists have made, really, at this revolutionary time in American history. So I think as we move ahead towards a convention, there are 3 points that we need to identify. First, that we stand for freedom against communist totalitarianism. And that needs to be stated time and again. President Trump has taken up the call. That needs to be reinforced. Secondly, to recognize communism everywhere is illegitimate. It is not a legitimate form of government, and we should have no truck with it. We should not have, for example, in the Chinese Communist Party, why do we have relations with the Chinese Communist Party? We should treat it as apartheid South Africa was treated. Frank, you know well during your years, of course, in DOD, with how South Africa was isolated by the United States and its allies. Well, that needs to be done, of course, to the Chinese Communist Party, because it is not a legitimate form of government. It is the product of Soviet imperialism. The Chinese Communist Party was created by the Comintern, by the Communist International at Lenin's direction. So it has nothing to do with China or Chinese history or the greatness of Han civilization. It again is a Soviet imperial product, and we should see it as a colonial government, a surviving remnant of colonialism in Beijing. When we see the Chinese Communist Party in that way, folks are going to be will recognize, of course, that it is illegitimate, and we should have nothing to do with it. The third point, of course, is to continue the importance of understanding our identity as a people, as Americans, and what we believe as a people. This occasion that we'll have next month in Dallas is a time to rekindle American national identity, and as a part of that, to recognize that everything that we have will be lost if Americans do not take action, if they do not act locally, if they do not support, however imperfect, the Republican candidates, not only in 2026, but of course in 2028. Because, as you know, Frank, heaven forbid, if the communists were to come back into power, we know what they're going to do. 60 million, 80 million people imported, statehood for the District of Columbia, for Puerto Rico, and perhaps others. We know the Supreme Court is lost because they will expand it. The Senate filibuster is lost, and there will never be a free and fair election in the United States again. So they will have achieved their aims of destroying the United States as a constitutional republic. So this occasion allows us to address those 3 issues, I think, succinctly, obviously, to inspire Americans and to convey to Americans why they must be as concerned about the midterm elections, of course, as presidential elections.
Dr. Thayer, thank you. And thank you for this incredible gift of your book, America's 100-Year Wars. It's unbelievably comprehensive and thought-provoking and timely and needed. And we look forward to comments on both the subject matter as well as the book from several of our presenters. But thank you again for your contribution to the program. We're going to turn next to a dear friend who has firsthand very hard experience with the communists. She is a refugee, in fact, from the place that they have done their most horrific damage, and that would be communist China. Her name is Xi Van Fleet. Xi is an author of a number of important books, including Made in America, which is about how Americans have enabled this threat from communist China, and more generally, as a result of what it does around the world to freedom-loving people everywhere, but with a special urgency to the takedown of the United States of America, against which they have not only declared an unrestricted war, they have also declared a people's war back in May of 2019. We're always delighted to have Xi with us. We only have her for a brief moment, so I wanted just to put a quick question to Xi. We're talking about a threat you have been warning about for years. Notably, you came to public attention by doing so in a place not far from here, the Loudoun County Public School Board, where you were warning about cultural Marxism in our curriculum. Brad mentioned that the schools are one of the lines of attack that the communists have been very successful in mounting and wielding. Could you just give us, in short, your reading of where we stand now? Do you agree with Dr. Thayer that we are in a revolutionary moment at the hands of, as we'll be discussing more, this red-green axis, but specifically this communist dimension of it?
I think in the just past few years, we are moving very fast to a real revolution. When I started talking, that was a few years ago, 2021. And the main focus for most people is cultural Marxism. They're trying to, push things like DEI, identity politics, and the race war, but very quickly, and that's alarming, actually, in the past few years, they bring back the economic Marxism. And then we hear people talking about, especially those self-claimed socialists. They're really talking about the revolution. They're talking about changing the system and take over the means of production. And a lot of American people heard that word and just went over their head. That is exactly the term for revolution. Take over the means of production, take over businesses. And that's what's going on in the New York. And a lot of people still have no idea that is communism. They are taking over not just the cultural institutions, which they already successfully did, but now they are talking about changing the system, fundamentally changing the system. And I think that now there's so much talk about the DSA and they are a threat to the Democratic Party. I don't think so. I think the Democratic Party has been going that direction for a long time. And now only that the DSA people openly talking about the goals that eventually the Communist Democrat Party will take us to. They're talking about this ban Senate, U.S. Senate, and they're talking about get rid of the presidency. And that sounds just absolutely, a lot of people just disregard it. That sounds crazy. It's not crazy. That is the goal. The goal is destroy our entire system and replace by what I would think communist. But communism is something I think that I think a lot of people just say, oh, communism. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a Uber driver, and he's from Ethiopia. He said, I don't like communism. Communism is bad. But what's going on in New York City is not communism. Mondani is not a communist. He wants to use the government to do good stuff. And this is what people get lost. Communism, in my experience, can summarize with one word: total control. And they started with promises. They always started with promises of a better world, promises of helping the poor, heal the sick, and all that Christian language. But once they get into power, it's control. And control, not just where you can live, whether you can drive a car, you can use gas, all that, but eventually it's control your mind. and that they have been so successful in taking over our educational institutions, control the mind of the young people, and then control your speech. And that's my experience. Total control. Every aspect of my life under Mao was controlled. And there's no choice. You have no personal choice. What you can do, cannot do, what you can have and not have, it's all determined by the party, by the state. And that's something, yes, hundreds of millions of people died, but we don't have to go that far to educate the American people. It's your liberty that is at risk. Eventually, the total control will lead to death, mass death. But it always started with a beautiful promise. And once you give them power, you'll soon find that your liberty is gone and every aspect of your life is controlled. And I call that slavery. Communism is slavery.
You are an exemplar of what I call a foreign-born American patriot. As a result, you have an appreciation for things that most Americans who've had the privilege of being born here and lived their lives here often don't. And that is not only the amazing aspects of a free nation and what it makes possible for individuals and the guarantees of freedom that are baked into our Constitution and Republic, but you also have an appreciation of how perishable freedom is, how at any moment, really, in a revolutionary moment in particular, it could be lost. Could you speak to both of those just briefly?
Yes, and this is something that it took me a long time to really understand and appreciate. And when I came here 40 years ago, exactly 40 years ago, actually I came here in 1986. This is my anniversary. Unbelievable, 40 years. I thought, like I think a lot of immigrants thought so, that freedom is a given. In America, it's freedom. We're free to do everything. But it took me quite a while to understand, even though our freedom, our liberty is from God. But now we see that God is being removed from our lives, from our institution, from our government, and from churches. That is the threat, that we have progressive churches now speaking the same language as Marxists. And that is the threat. And this country, it took me really a while to understand, is absolutely built on the foundation of Christian principles. Once God is removed, we will lose our freedom and our liberty. And just like Jefferson said, the God that gave us liberty, the God that gave us life also gave us liberty. I think that is something I really think a lot of people are not paying attention. And you can see that even the DSA members, they talk about their radical program as Christian because they want to give healthcare to everyone, including, illegals or whatever. But they are not doing it out of their own charity. No, they want the government to rob part of the population and give to the other. That is absolutely communism. So I think this is something, something I think I start to really, really realize and understood. And I think this is something that Americans should give a lot of thought to and say where our liberty is from. Once you remove the source, you remove or what we take for granted.
We're going to turn next to a woman I introduced briefly a moment ago, the president of the American Freedom Alliance, Karen Siegemund, no stranger to these programs. We're always delighted to have her with us, a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China, and truly one of those who's a catalyst for the thought leading that is essential to maintaining freedom in this revolutionary moment, especially. Dr. Siegemund, I know you've had a chance to actually read the book, which I have not yet. So perhaps you can comment a bit on its contents as well as its importance.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And it's always an honor to be to be among you and doing this incredibly important work. And what the Committee on the Present Danger China does specifically is alert people to the danger that is China, that is the Chinese Communist Party. And Brad's book, of course, addresses this most specifically. I came up during the Cold War against the Soviet Union at a time when everybody on the entire planet understood that there was a war going on. It was, albeit a cold one, between communism and capitalism, and the world was divided into these two spheres of influence, but also two spheres that were ideologically at odds and at war with each other. We all knew it. And during that time, I worked in the defense industry and I had a top secret clearance. And the idea of working jointly on things with the Soviet Union or having any kind of collaboration or talking about them as anything other than the enemy was preposterous. Then we won the Cold War. We beat the Soviet Union. I'd like to think in part because of the work that I did in defense, helping find Soviet submarines and so on. And then we seemed to sort of relax and imagine that the enemy had been defeated. Well, the Soviet Union had been defeated, but communism had not. And Brad's book, and yes, I have it right here, it's just brilliant, makes the point that we may think we're not at war with communism, but communism is certainly at war with us and has been so for 100 years. He lays out the case, how this happened with the Soviet Union, with Leninism, how Leninism then became an outsider influence on China. The Chinese Communist Party now, as he noted, communism itself is illegitimate, but the Chinese Communist Party is also illegitimate. So he not only does he describe the ideology, but the extent to which the good people of China are living under conditions that are horrific and not of their choice. So they themselves are living under an illegitimate regime. It's so easy to forget. We forgot the lessons that we learned during the Cold War. We forgot how to be on a war footing. But I promise you, the Chinese have not. They have declared people's war on us. That we have been dealing with them seeing us as a foe. There's a notion of unrestricted warfare that and if you're listening to this, you're very familiar with this idea. It's any tactic up to and including kinetic war. When we think of war, we think of kinetic war. Any tactic up to and including that. And as Brad mentioned in his remarks, political warfare, and especially they've captured the ideas industry, which means not only are our kids ignorant, and we're many generations into this, ignorant of communism, and this is what got Xi involved in this in the first place. The extent to which our kids are not only ignorant, but they think communism is an entirely different thing from what it is, that it's harmless. And we're seeing the extent of this whitewashing of it when the Democrat Socialists of America, the DSA, is playing an ever more overt role in our elections. We're seeing this with Mamdani. We're seeing this in Los Angeles. We're seeing this across the country. It is an ideology that must have global dominance. It is a totalitarian ideology that must have global dominance. What's in the way of global dominance? We are. Everything that is our foundational beliefs is completely counter to what they require. Every single belief that underpins who we are, and as Xi just noted, Judeo-Christian values, and this is one of Brad's points in his books as well. They have attacked our civilizational confidence. So there's two aspects that he brings to the fore in the book. One is warning about communism, its evils, its tactics, its goals, its totalitarian designs on us, but also the extent to which it has undermined our confidence in our own selves. These are two key elements, and his book makes very clear one of the main approaches is going after who we are, what we believe in, and our Judeo-Christian underpinnings. You take that out and you've opened the floodgates to them coming in. I'm just going to note very quickly, this is not too dissimilar from the Islamic tactic as well. Jihad takes many forms, not just violent. Same thing. It rides on the back of the floodgates that communism has opened. So his book it's a veritable tome of supreme importance because people are much too unaware. I just have to say, we are hosting Brad at an event on very fittingly Constitution Day, September 17th in Washington, D.C. You can find out more information about it. It is free of charge. Everyone will get a copy of the book. He will be speaking. We're very excited about it. Again, Washington, D.C., AmericanFreedomAlliance.org. It's part of the launch of his book. The too many are too ignorant is a terrifying prospect, that we have this opportunity with the midterm convention, key to revive the notions of freedom, who the enemy is and who we are, and the extent to which it is just crucial that we stand up to them. So thank you, Frank.
That's a perfect segue to our next presenter. K. Carl Smith is a man who has served with distinction in the United States Army as a Judge Advocate General, as well as having airborne qualifications. He has been working for decades now to call attention to both the important historical role and the inspiring contribution still to be made by one of the leaders of the abolitionist movement in the United States, Frederick Douglass, a man who was himself a slave at one point, became one of America's most influential proponents of freedom and opponents of slavery. And in that role, he was an instrumental figure in not only that movement, but also in the birth and the ultimate success of the Republican Party, which led the fight in the political realm to abolish slavery, albeit at an incredibly high cost. The election of President Lincoln as the Republican Party's first presidential nominee, and the Civil War that followed, with the loss of some 650,000 people, including Abraham Lincoln himself, and the ultimate beginning of what turned out to be yet another phase of the struggle to free those who had been oppressed by slavery in this country, the Civil Rights Movement. I think it's fair to say throughout all of this time, whether they were avowed adherents to the thinking and tenets of Karl Marx, or whether they were simply proponents of slavery, the Democratic Party, in contrast to the Republicans, was working to preserve some of these horrifying practices. And even after it embarked on the Civil Rights Movement very belatedly, 1965, it, as our colleague and friend Jim Simpson has pointed out, simply sort of migrated the idea of servitude for blacks by putting them firmly in the maw of the Great Society and continuing the process of suppressing them on the plantation in a figurative sense, if not literal. K. Carl, thank you so much for the insights that you are bringing to this revolutionary moment, and in particular for what we've been collaborating in thinking about and are now, I hope, going to be very aggressively trying to implement, namely something that Karen referred to there at the end, turning a midterm convention into both a celebration of this party and its historic role, and also making a very, very concerted effort to be the party of freedom once again, opposing those on the Democratic side who will be championing slavery, communist form, or the alternative jihadists with whom they're collaborating. So over to you, sir, and thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything the other guests had to say, because this is a pivotal moment in our country. Democrats, socialists are gaining ground, it appears, but it's more than appearance. They are gaining ground. And we that live for liberty, stand for liberty, we got to come up with a strategy so we can restore our founding principles and win. And the only thing about what's happening in Dallas, I just wish Karen and you had the opportunity to speak there, because I don't know who's speaking in Dallas, but listening to you all speak and the lady earlier who had real life experiences under Mao, they need to hear this, because I'm concerned, because we have something that's happening in this country that I'd never thought happened in my lifetime, but it is here in front of us. And what the young lady who had the experience with Mao, she tied it together. She said Marxism, communism is just slavery. And that kind of tied into, Frank, when I just wrote my book, Douglas versus Marx, and kind of, if I could, just give an introduction what that book is all about. Well, Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx were both born in the same year, 1818. They were contemporaries. So here are two men who were contemporaries who looked at oppression in the world. Karl Marx looked at oppression through a theory. He wrote his philosophy sitting in coffee shops and libraries because he never experienced oppression. And Douglas had real life experience about oppression. They looked at oppression in the world, came with two totally different worldviews. Karl Marx believed our rights come from government, and Douglas wrote and spoke about how our rights come from God. So when I've been a student of Frederick Douglass for many years. So as I studied Frederick Douglass, I said, wait a minute. Frederick Douglass is the answer to save this nation, because Frederick Douglass wrote about his experience as a slave. In one of his speeches called The Nature of Slavery, he said the first aim of slavery is to get rid of God. Well, that's the first aim of Marxism, is also to get rid of God. So by Douglass writing about his experience as a slave, he in essence was arguing against Marxism before the word Marxism was invented, because the techniques of oppression, as the young lady mentioned earlier, the techniques of oppression used by the plantation slave master are identical to the techniques of oppression used by a slave government we call Marxism, communism. So in this book, we basically put Douglass and Karl Marx in the same room using source documents and let them debate. So here's Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx in the same room, and they're debating all of the attacks of Marxism. They're debating free speech, the right to keep and bear arms, the role of government. Where do our rights come from? And that is the fundamental debate that's in the book, because if we don't understand that, get that right, all the other rights doesn't matter. So all the attacks of Marxism, Douglass actually wrote about when he talked about his experience as a slave. And the book is a powerful tool to really teach people, especially the next generation, that there's a difference between liberty and communism, and why liberty must be valued. So the book, it ends with a reflection, talking points, the moral of the story, discussion questions, and guided solutions to the questions. Let me give you an example how the book has already been beneficial. There's a young man here in Alabama, as a college student, named is KJ, and he had been reading my book, Douglass versus Marx, The Battle for America's Soul. And in his history class, this is last year, the professor stood up in history class and said that the Constitution is a racist document, and to prove that it is a racist document, they gave us a 3/5 clause saying that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. I was taught that in college. I'm a graduate of historical black college. I was taught that in college and believed it for 35 years. Well, KJ had been reading the book Douglass versus Marx, and when the professor said that, KJ politely pushed back against the professor, brought up what Douglass said, because that's one of the debates in the book, brought up what Douglass said about the Constitution, calling it a glorious liberty document, and what Douglass said about the 3/5 clause when Douglass was in Glasgow, Scotland. The bottom line is KJ won the argument with the professor, And he won the classroom because other students in the classroom wanted to know more about Frederick Douglass's liberty message. So that's the power of leveraging Frederick Douglass to fight Marxism. And the way I like to put it, since Douglass wrote a lot about liberty, that the liberty message of Frederick Douglass is the most effective liberty message to defeat Marxism. Douglassism is the answer to defeat Marxism. We just have to leverage it. And God put this book on my heart because America doesn't need another book. America needs a strategy. And that's what we put together and to help teach young people and teach Americans about the importance of liberty and why it must be defended and fought for. And Douglass is the answer to do that.
Amen. We look forward to both collaborating with you in the run-up to the events in Dallas, Carl, as well as hopefully making sure that these messages are heard. Our cleanup batter for today is George Racely, a man who knows intimately the various challenges to freedom that we are confronting from Marxists, yes, and from the Sharia supremacists as well. He has written about all of these topics extensively in his role as the managing editor of a marvelous online resource called Conservative HQ. It's an online newsletter of the great Richard Viguerie. He has also brought to his writings the wealth of experience of a senior congressional staff member as well as a senior advisor to Vice President of the United States. Plus, on top of all of that, experience in some 300 campaigns from every level and at, I think, in various states as well as nationwide. George Racely, I thank you so much. You responded to a last-minute call to participate in this. I'm glad you were able to hear what we have covered to date and look forward to your closing comments. In particular, if I may importune you to talk about this, the importance of this upcoming convention and the opportunity it presents to really imbue with the public, the voters, the electorate, a sense of the urgency of the times we're in, as well as what can be done about them by turning out and voting, among other things. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Frank. I'm delighted to participate, and I'm particularly delighted to be exposed to Brad's book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I definitely will, and we will definitely review it on CHQ. But to your question, this midterm convention, in my view, is absolutely crucial to identifying what's really at stake in this election and future elections. Conservatives and Republicans never win unless we draw a sharp contrast between our liberty-oriented agenda and the slavery-oriented agenda of our opponents. In this case, the Democratic Socialist Party of America, which is literally taking over the old Democratic Party right in front of our eyes. I find it very interesting that a lot of establishment Democrats have been saying, oh, well, this is okay. These young, new Democratic Socialists have a lot of enthusiasm, and we can channel that enthusiasm on behalf of our establishment Democrat candidates. Well, one of the things that Brad's book will make clear and will disabuse them of that notion is a reminder that when the Bolsheviks took over Russia and created the Soviet Union, the first to be executed were the Mensheviks, who were their socialist allies in the takeover. And so we really are at a point, and I don't think it's overdramatic to say that these next few elections are going to determine whether, we defend liberty by ballots or by bullets. And the communists have evolved a doctrine which is targeted very, very narrowly and very, very intelligently at how our politics and how our culture and how our mentality works here. And that is that we're oriented towards immediate results. And so they, on the other hand, play the long game. And so the notion of the 100-year war, which is actually very accurate in terms of, for example, the relationship between the Soviet Union and the Communist Chinese Party, and now Red China. In the 1920s, the Soviets hosted a convention of the colonial peoples, and their goal was to build an alliance and to activate peoples who were allegedly oppressed under colonialism. The Chinese, among those, also the Muslim people of the Middle East and North Africa. And while it didn't produce a lot of immediate results then, it planted seeds that we are now very bitterly harvesting in the alliance between Marxists and jihadis. This is being advanced with great vigor by the Red Chinese. Just this week, as a matter of fact, I think yesterday, they came out and said, well, no, we're not going to participate in the isolation of Iran because that's not the way to solve this war. Well, they're right in one sense, and the way to solve this war is to win it and to stop with these circular negotiations. But more to the point, they understand that prolonging the war advances their interests, and it is one of the weaknesses of our system that we are not good at playing the long game. And so the notion that we have to educate our populace as to these threats and activate them, particularly for this next election, is one of the benefits of this midterm convention. And I've been fortunate to attend something like 10 Republican national conventions. This is the first midterm convention that the party's hosted. It's an absolutely crucial messaging opportunity, but it's only useful if there is a stark contrast drawn between the Republican and Trump agenda of liberty, economic freedom, Western Judeo-Christian values, and the Democrat and socialist communist agenda of totalitarian control and of every aspect of our lives. And Xi's comments about the one word that was her, experience under Mao was control, is absolutely what's at stake in this upcoming election and in 2028. And just winning those two elections, there's not a guarantee that that's going to last forever. And we've absolutely got to build a coalition of the educated, is what I call it, that will be activated and motivated to turn out, win elections, educate their fellow citizens about what's at stake. And believe me, when I say that the choice upcoming is ballots or bullets, that's what our enemies are saying. And so we need to believe them when jihadis, for example, say that they're going to take over our government, they're going to eliminate our constitutional protections and guarantees by ballots or bullets. And so I commend to the audience Brad's book, its message, but also to engage in this upcoming midterm convention. Let your Republican Party leaders know that you want to hear this message of liberty versus totalitarianism, of economic freedom versus economic control, of Judeo-Christian Western values versus communism.
Brilliantly put, as well as very handsomely done to sort of synthesize, I think, the messages of the program. Let me just do a quick line of questioning to you both. As we talk about freedom and the Constitution as ultimately what guarantees those God-given rights, it's striking to see that the people that we are warning about are being, as you suggested, in connection with the Sharia supremacists, George, but it's equally true of these so-called democratic socialists. They are intent on replacing our Constitution with, some charter of their own. Sharia, in the case of the jihadis, I guess, I don't know, the Communist Manifesto or something like it, on the red side of the red-green axis. Could you speak to the point that part of what makes, I think, Bradley Thayer's warnings about the revolutionary moment is how brazen these people are being in declaring their hatred for the Constitution, their determination to be done with it. And as you said, George, I think when they tell you these sorts of things, believe them. But what does it tell us about the fact that they are now so bold in making clear what they're about?
I would say that the reason they're so bold is they think they're winning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like being ahead at the 2-minute warning to enthuse the team to press harder. And so I think that that's one of the reasons. And if we look around the results in some recent elections, if we look at the collapse of the Democratic Party establishment, they are right in that sense. Now, the crucial thing is we've got the two-minute warning, and we also have a chance to get the ball back and run some very important plays at this midterm convention. And so this is an absolutely crucial opportunity to turn around the momentum and get people on the right and in the center enthused about this election and participating in it because they've been educated as to what's actually at stake, which is the Constitution and the liberties that it guarantees.
Karen, you have been doing heroic work, I think, with, among other things, a roadshow, but also programs in Los Angeles. I've been privileged to participate in quite a number of them that are really, as is Brad Thayer with this new book, America's 100 Years of War, making clear that this is no drill, as we talked about on an appearance you had on Securing America earlier today, to the extent that the enemy is, as George says, emboldened by their sense that they are winning, and that the hour is very late. What are your specific thoughts about how best to try, and on Brad's comments about, his calls to action as well?
It really is a pivotal moment. It feels existential. It is not a drill. It is a revolutionary moment. We do have the election coming up. And yes, the roadshow that we did, World War III, the early years, we started with one in 2023 and then did 5 of them across the country in swing states in 2024, that you were a key element of every one of those. The idea was to bring home the point to people. 2024 was before the presidential election. That it wasn't a drill then. It's serious business. One can lose one's country. Xi, again, her lived experience. My dad was born in Berlin in 1928 and watched what happened to his country. It's not, while too many people find it impossible to imagine that things aren't going to always be the way they are, the left, the communists, have been undermining all that we are and all that we believe assiduously for a very long time. the left's long march through the institutions has undermined, as you know, Brad's phrase, we all use it, have undermined the ideas industry. That's education. It's everything. It's the air that we breathe and the water that we swim in. Everything has been taken over to this extent. And I just want to make another point that people have been talking about. This idea of culture being, that politics is downstream from culture. Well, that used to be the case until the left took over the culture. There is no separation between the two anymore. The culture is political. To communism, there is no such thing as anything outside of the political space. So wherever they fight, we also have to fight. Wherever they are has become a front in this war. They have been trying to undermine us, take us over, conquest, and all of this. Again, communism requires things to be total. So whatever they have turned into a front, which is pretty much everything, it's sports, it's bathrooms, it's absolutely everything is a front. So there's nothing untouched. If they leave nothing untouched, we also have to leave nothing untouched. So education, key element, media, key element, sports, key element, the Smithsonian, all of this. And one last bit of this, why do they feel that they're winning? Because they are. Why do they feel emboldened? Because we've allowed them to be emboldened. And it's not just the cultural space. It's not just the political space. It's not just the legislative space. It is the election space. Where I live in Los Angeles, the idea that our votes matter is preposterous. This is a full-on Stalin-esque kind of thing, or Stalinist. It's not who votes, but who counts the votes. It's not the case across the country yet, but it will be. And the more they go after the big states with the big electoral numbers, and, you know, to George's point, they are increasingly brazen. The DSA is increasingly brazen because they feel they can be. What is our job? To let them think twice about that. So they feel they can be. They feel everyone's on their side. They feel they have elections on their side. But there's another aspect of this too, which is the extent to which they paint Donald Trump and those who support him as evil, as Hitler, as the devil. So not only do they feel that they are right, but they feel it's the right thing to do everything possible to take him down, to take us down. So it's a multifaceted, multi-fronted war on us. We did those events, World War III. We're going to revisit it in October. World War III, just an update, because the war continues. They are emboldened. I like to imagine we are starting to recognize, we patriots, those of us who love America, recognize the nature of the war. And Brad made the point, make it too big to rig. I think we've got to do that. But again, also the convention, we have to inspire. We have to embolden ourselves. We have to get our confidence back up. We need to rebuild the foundational walls, the load-bearing walls, without which we cannot survive. And that's on us.
I can't think of a better way to close that really very illuminating conversation with each of you. You are among the best of our team, and I'm so proud to be able to present each of you to our audience often on a fairly regular basis, again, for which I'm very grateful. Let me simply say that Dr. Bradley Thayer, this book is a signal contribution to the fight. It is vital that it receive the kind of popular both attention and readership. I'm sure that it is on its way to becoming a bestseller. I think even in the early sales, it has already demonstrated that. But what I'm so appreciative of in particular is the combination of scholarship and practical experience in the national security practitioner business as an employee in the Defense Department under the great Andy Marshall for a time, as well as the evocative nature of what you are about now, which is lifting up a generation or two of Americans to understand the challenge of our time and meet it head on with your call to action as well as your well-documented warnings. G. Van Fleet, you are a national treasure. I consider you to be, as I said, a foreign-born American patriot, but your firsthand experiences, your authentic foundation for the warnings that you've been making, whether it's in the school boards of Loudoun County or whether it's at the national and even international level, are deeply appreciated and so desperately needed as well. I can't thank enough our friend Kay Carl Smith. I personally believe what a lifetime of channeling the great Frederick Douglass is equipping you to play a singular role at this moment in inspiring this, as Lincoln put it, new birth of freedom that the Republican Party can and must stand for and speak to directly. And by the way, not just the communist piece of it. The president has been very clear about that, thank God, but also the Sharia supremacist component, because it is very much a red-green threat and axis. Our friend Steve Bannon calls it the Marxist jihadist threat. Both pieces of this have to be addressed. They both are intent on enslaving us. They both are working assiduously to take down our government, our Constitution, and our freedoms. They both must be recognized, therefore, as in mortal peril and prevented from succeeding. Karen Sigeman, as always, you are a thought leader, and I think in particular your comments about our constitutional confidence having been shaken by the cumulative effects of these efforts by the communists of various, iterations and generations seeking to undermine everything we hold dear, the institutions, our history, our accomplishments, our shortcomings, they're pretty big on, but the rest of it, not so much. And as a result, I think what we've been seeing among a generation or two of Americans who have been raised by those who have penetrated our institutions in their long march are desperately in need of awakening to what this actually will mean if the radical left of the Democratic Socialists of America and their ilk and the jihadis have their way with us. And finally, George Racely, again, thank you. Your counsel in connection with this campaign, we call it the Ban Sharia, .com campaign, yes, but the campaign is branded as Save Texas, Save America campaign. You can find much more about all of this at bansharia.com, a project of the Institute for the American Future, which also sponsors this Committee on the Present Danger China, along with Brian Kennedy's American Strategy Group. We are very, very keen to have help with this. Please check out that website for much more about the jihadist piece of it in particular, bansharia.com. Let me just say in closing, I think that we are here, all of us, at this time because God Almighty has designed each of us to play a role in this historic moment, this revolutionary moment. I hope that this presentation and others that we've been making, and certainly the great work that Brad Thayer will be doing in the days to come in connection with briefing his book, selling it, will truly empower each of us to play that God-given role and do so with decisiveness so that we will be able to say to our children and our children's children. What they are able to enjoy and pass on to their posterity was in part made possible by our willingness to fight for freedom. I commend it to all of you. I hope you will be part of it. I ask God to bless each of you, and God bless America. Over and out.